Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 27th of July, 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. And we're pleased to be joined by David Scott, who'll be reporting, of course, from north of the border with northern exposure. I was surprised to wake up this morning, Mike, because today, of course, most people were going to be dead due to the heat. I looked out of the window and it was grey sky and raining, a little bit cool, in fact.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the BBC is going to do, but I'm sure they'll come up with an alternative to that loss of death.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Now, we're going to start off with death of another kind, and that's Brexit, of course. And Dominic and Michel Barnier were meeting yesterday. They gave a press conference. And what a wonderful press conference it was as well. So we'll bring David straight in here because lots of mainstream media coverage on this, David. And the Scotsman here is the example that you threw in my direction. The headline is UK cannot and will not accept key part of Theresa May's Brexit plan.
Yes, the EU won't. Yes, well, I obviously believe the Scotsman, and I was amazed to learn from you today, Mike, that might be less than accurate.
Well, just tell us what the article says, David.
Well, they're saying that the idea that the third country responsibility for tariff collection is completely unacceptable to the EU. They're saying the EU cannot and the EU will not delegate the application of its customs policy and thank you, Scotsman, for that, rules and VAT and duty collection to a non-member who would not be subject to the EU's governance structures. I hope we all just adore the quality of the governance in the EU. In fact, they're legendary. Apart from the fact that they're unable to actually get a set of accounts audited, the governance structures are legendary. Not another word for corruption and graft at all, Mike.
Yes, but you've hit the key point there. Look, let's just have a look at some of the things that Barnier said, and we might interject a little bit through this, but let's have a listen to him.
Last Friday, I made some initial comments on the UK's white paper. This week confirmed that the UK proposals on security mark a real step forward. The UK has provided new guarantees on the protection of fundamental rights and the uniform application of law. The White Paper commits the UK to membership of the European Convention on Human Rights. It recognizes the European Court of Justice as the only arbiter of EU law.
So we'll stop it there for a second because this is a key point. I understand now immediately why so much of the mainstream media coverage is focusing on this customs union aspect, because what Barnier has just said, and remember Dominic was standing right beside him at the time, he didn't kick Barnier out of the way and say, no, we didn't agree to that. So what Barnier has just said is that, European Convention on Human Rights, that's outside the European Union in any case. So the fact that we're staying as part of that, when I believe, David, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were a founding member of that before the EU was ever established, that's fair enough. But then he went on to say that Britain recognises the European Court of Justice as the only arbiter regarding EU law. Now, this goes against everything that Theresa May has been saying, because she said when she was introducing the white paper that Britain would not fall under the remit of the European Court of Justice, and that there would have to be some kind of arbitration process that sits in between the UK and the EU. That seems to have been dropped, according to what Barnier says here.
So it would seem. And this whole switcheroo between the European Convention on Human Rights, which is out with EU law, beyond preceding EU law, and he then says the European Court of Human Justice is the only body which will be supreme over EU law. Well, okay, but the link between the two seems to have been smoke and mirrors. It's causing movement. So we've moved the Convention on Human Rights into EU law, and as such, we've moved Britain under the European Court of Justice again, which was one of the core elements which we all voted to reject.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's.
These are important safeguards. They enlarge the possibilities of what we can do together on internal security, in particular on data exchange. Based on the protection of personal data and based on reciprocity, the EU and the UK can explore the modalities for a close cooperation on the following points. One, the exchange of DNA, fingerprints, and vehicle registration information, so-called PRUM. Two, the exchange of passenger name records to better track and identify individuals involved in terrorism and crime. Three, swift and effective extradition based on the procedural rights for suspects.
Now, it does worry me, the possibility that Monsieur Barnier and Dominic Raab were exchanging DNA during this process, but there you go. They want to continue exchanging DNA, and they also, but the main thing I wanted to focus on there, Brian, was the extradition part of it, because European arrest warrant and extradition that goes alongside that has been one of the main problems between Britain and the EU as far as most British people are concerned anyway. But this sounds like we're going to stay within that infrastructure, and I think that's exactly what we said was going to happen.
Well, absolutely. This is all the big state infrastructure, most of it very dangerous. So what did he say? Exchange of DNA, fingerprints and vehicle registration details, passenger names records, for terror and crime. If you're travelling, you're an automatic suspect as being a terrorist. And something else, swift and effective extradition. This is all deep state stuff that he's doing here, and we're going to be right in the middle of it still.
And then he went on to talk about defence.
And I recall that this cooperation EU-UK in defence will be in addition to what we do already together in NATO, and in addition to bilateral agreements between the UK and certain member states.
So, sorry to say we've had it right, because we said that these bilateral agreements were only the tip of the iceberg with regard to defence cooperation. He's made it quite clear there that the UK and the EU will cooperate on defence in addition to what the UK might be doing within NATO, and in addition to what the UK might be doing with the bilateral agreements, for example, with the French, the Germans, various other countries. He's talking European Defence Union.
A complete, full unification of the system. So there's no change. Brexit without the exit stands.
Absolutely. Now let's come back onto this again. This is the Scotsman article again, and I just want to highlight this point. The headlines right across the mainstream media said, EU cannot and will not accept key part of Theresa May's Brexit plan, and that's the end of it. They didn't, as far as I saw, they didn't give any comment on the qualifier. So let's just listen to exactly what Barnier said, because David has mentioned this, but this is an important point.
Ladies and gentlemen, in contrast, on our future economic relationship, it comes at no surprise that finding common ground between the EU 27 and the UK is more difficult. But we have agreed already on a common denominator. We both want an ambitious free trade agreement. In March, the EU leaders proposed an unprecedented free trade agreement to the UK. Another area of convergence between the EU and the UK is the need for ambitious customs arrangements. The EU cannot, and the EU will not, delegate the application of its customs policy and rules, VAT and excise duty collection, to a non-member. who would not be subject to the EU's governance structures.
So it is this part who would not be subject to the EU's governance structures, which is the key point. So whenever the mainstream media headlines say that he has rejected Theresa May's proposal, he hasn't done anything of the kind. He's simply setting out a negotiating position, which is that if we are to proceed on the basis that Theresa May has mentioned, that we will be subject to the EU's governance mechanisms. So, David, basically what we've seen in the mainstream press today has been fake news.
Yeah, so just to summarise, you can have an unprecedented trade agreement, unprecedented apart from the fact we just reached one with America a week ago. You can have essentially what you've got now in terms of trade, providing you have essentially what you've got now in terms of supremacy of law and management of customs, and providing you have the same as you have now in terms of the internal security state apparatus of the EU, and you provide us more than we have now in terms of PESCO, military union, and the end to the UK armed forces. That's the offer, is it?
Seems to be.
Okay, I've got it. Where do we reject it? Where do we say no? Who's going to say no?
Don't tell me you're calling for. I hope you're not calling for a second referendum there, David.
No. We just need someone who will listen to the first referendum and say no and say, look, that's a lovely deal. Thank you so much for making that offer. We reject it, and not give them the money, and basically, imagine that we lived in a country with a political leadership with the gumption to actually rescind the 1972 Act and just walk away.
Yes. Well, let's talk about second referenda now, because David Lammy MP is tweeting out that Gary Lineker is a top man because he's decided to call for a second referendum.
This is a remarkable little tweet. Now, in the general era of the decline of the West, let's look at this. Top man Gary Lineker. I'm biased. He did play for Spurs official, so football comes. Bread and circuses. Football comes first. But thank God, I bet he's not Christian. Thank God, with a small g, some people are prepared to stick their neck out and not pander to the quote will of the people end quote bollocks. So this is an elected official. This is someone who's there to represent the people in the mother of parliaments, so called. And this is him saying that a vote by, 17.4 million people is will of the people bollocks. So this is the attitude that's running the country. This is the view that on the one hand, we're going to claim power over you because of democracy, right? That there is no limit to the will of the people. There are no barriers. There are no limitations. 51% gets anything it wants because, hey, democracy. But at the other hand, if it goes against us, well, it's just will of the people bollocks, isn't it?
Yes.
A remarkable tweet. I think it summarised the contempt the political elite show the people, and I think it summarises the idea of democracy, always a flawed one, always containing within itself the seeds of its own destruction. It is now reaching a point where it's been abandoned by the political elite. It's served its purpose. It's given excuse to remove our ancient rights and freedoms because, hey, democracy, we got you to vote for it. But that's now run its course, and you're starting to vote the wrong way. So it's goodbye for democracy.
Well, David, don't worry at all, because it's all a game. As promised, let's have a look at what Parliament is selling young people now. And here we are, MP for a week. This online game teaches students the range and value of MPs' work and builds an understanding of some of the pressures they face. This is a remarkable piece of programming here. I encourage people to get onto the government website. Have a look at it and play with it. I'll give you a brief excerpt, but let's look at more detail what it's about. It's going to challenge your students to survive a week in politics and keep their party, their voters and the media happy. The party comes first there, as you see. Students are scored according to the decisions they make. The game adapts to players by setting less or more demanding tasks, how well they're doing. It gives young people a virtual taste of life as an MP, highlighting the range and value of MPs' works. And the game builds students' understanding of the role of a Member of Parliament. MP for a week is an ideal activity for pairs, individual, or incorporated into a whole class and flipped learning. It can be used on desktops, tablets, or mobile devices. And it links to the curriculum. There was an added bit down the side of the page here, because you can also have a look at a video on what is the House of Commons, and there's another one, an animation, short animation, well, it'd have to be, on MPs in the House of Commons. So we're now really diluting Parliament into fantasy land and gaming, so young people are not going to know what's real and what's game. This is it. Now, hopefully I'm going to be able to show you my initial attempts to delve into this game. It's a little bit slow. I was making decisions on the spot, but we did get some interesting things out of it. So let's see what happens. And I'll give a little bit of an overview for those who are just listening as it opens up, but hopefully it's going to go here. It should do. Here we go. So we come on to a new opener, start your week, it says, and there's a picture of Parliament. You can simply click on this, and then we get a little bit of hype. A week is a long time in politics, quote. We can see the alarm clock going off, and the next thing is there's callers on the line, and a young lady saying she wants to know what Parliament's going to do about climate change. Will my MP take into account my views? I want to be listened to. So lots of emotive pictures. My MP has said he wants a change in the law. And then it asks, how do MPs choose between their own views and the party line?
Sorry.
And then we're into the game.
Can I just clarify? How do MPs choose between their own views and the party line?
Yeah.
What about the representative views?
Well, we come on to that. So the game's now running. You can select difficulty. I chose medium, and I decided to go in for financial matters. It gives you a congratulations, you're in, and then you're Monday morning and you start the game and the alarm clock goes off. Presumably you have a shower there. And then you get an option as to what you want to select. You can see that you've got 3 messages and you've got a press inquiry. I decided to go for the messages. It tells you as an MP you're going to get a lot of messages. And out of the 3, the one that caught my eye was a message from the government whip. So I clicked on that button, and it told me that there was a reminder that to all governing party backbenchers about Friday evening's vote, which is about giving people 14 years old the vote. I decided to say I didn't think they were mature enough, and the game scored me by dropping the party's reputation. Very interesting bit of manipulation there. So there I am at 10:30. I've already lost my party some reputation, and now I've got to face the press, and various little cartoon press people stand up and ask questions on various subjects. You select the main topic you're going to talk about. So I've got crime selected at the bottom of the screen, and what I should then do is click on the reporter that's holding up a crime, the justice scales symbol. I wasn't quick enough to pick that up all in one go, so we'll stop there, but I think you get an idea of how the game is running. And I was just fascinated that within no time at all I was in conflict with the Tory whips. I'd trashed the party's reputation because I didn't agree that we should be giving 14-year-olds the vote. But how interesting that this whole game opens, for example, with propaganda, global warming, and then we are encouraging young people who are going to play the game to think that they should actually be given the vote at the age of 14. What the game didn't mention when it was talking about the whips was anything to do with a quote from this man, Conservative whip Tom Fortescue, 1970-73, when he said the whips would help cover up scandals, including those involving small boys, in order to get MPs to do as the whips wanted. Most people would consider that to be blackmail, but the game didn't seem to cover that at all, Mike. I was a bit disappointed in that. I don't know whether the game got on to David Cameron being totally dismissive of historical sex abuse claims. Move on, there was nothing to see. So I'm not sure of how accurate this game is, but let me just move through to this bit here, because this is where they talk about what you can actually learn from it. Just need to bring it up on the other screen so I can talk you through it. But it says, for the national curriculum for England, pupils should be taught about the development of the political system of democratic government in the United Kingdom, including the roles of citizens, Parliament and the monarch, the operation of Parliament, including voting and elections, and the role of political parties. Presumably they'll be talking about blackmail and misappropriation of money. The precious liberties enjoyed by the citizens of the UK, the nature of rules and laws and the justice system, the role of the police, the roles played by public institutions and voluntary groups in society. So we've got the lot here, Mike. This is full propaganda, because we are now reframing the youngsters to understand that charities and NGOs are also part of the democratic structure. It goes on. What have we got here? So we've got a Northern Ireland curriculum, which is a little bit different. And if you go onto the second page of this document, then we've also got one for Scotland. And because we've got David here with us, it says social studies, people in society, economy and business. Second, I can describe the main features of a democracy and discuss the rights and responsibilities of citizens in Scotland. Is that an allegation that there's a democracy running in Scotland, David?
Well, and indeed, David, with that level of education, you must be, I mean, democracy is in rude health, isn't it?
So, well, the rude it does involve the word rude. Democracy in Scotland. There's been a lot of discussion this week, because it's silly season. There's not very much happening, and the nationalists are trying to maintain the fervour amongst the 50,000 or so die-hard flag-waving supporters for another go at another independence referendum. This is kind of like EU, but everyone changes sides and swaps arguments and just carries on as though nothing's happened. And one of the things that they have been doing is, again, going to the Supreme Court. Now, the action in the Supreme Court has been taken by the Westminster government over an act passed by or a motion passed by the Holyrood Parliament regarding Brexit, which is out with its competence. So this has gone to the Supreme Court of whether Holyrood can do this, and there's a lot of argument. It's quite interesting. Live, it's quite refreshing, incidentally, when things go to the Supreme Court. You actually see what happens, because it's all live and you can watch it, not like normal court cases in Scotland, which are very secret, and it's very difficult to find out what's happened at all, even if you actually are the accused. This has prompted a whole debate about the nature of sovereignty and the nature of authority within our country. And the point has been made that the Westminster Parliament is sovereign and the Holyrood one is not. And this has been greeted with howls of "see, I told you so" in nasty English from the Scottish National Party. But of course, it doesn't mean what they suggest it means. It means that the Parliament is sovereign, and that no other body can tell the Parliament what to do. Doesn't mean the Parliament's sovereign over the people. Right, and here we go. So there's a big debate about whether the people are sovereign, and in Scotland the people are sovereign. But of course that applies to the whole of the UK. But this word, the people, again comes to a crude democracy where 51% can control everything. Right, and then if you're not in the 51%, then essentially you can be blind, rights removed. You can anything can no protection. And this is one of the problems with the whole idea of. So what does it mean in Scotland? Well, I would say it means trying to dupe the people in order to get a bare 51% majority, and then using that to ride roughshod over their ancient rights. And practice is what it means.
Yes, indeed. Okay.
I was going to say I agree with that, and hopefully people are going to show an interest in that game on the Westminster site. That would be a beautiful topic to write to your MPs about, asking why it fails to tell the truth about what MPs are really up to.
I wonder if any of them would actually succeed at that game. That's another question. But anyway, let's move on to defence stuff, David. And well, the Herald's saying that it's utterly shocking. It's an utterly shocking blow to the Scots shipbuilding industry as the plan for new Royal Navy frigates has been halted.
Yes, all right. And this is again, it's not quite right. This is slightly fake news. And for the news been
right, David. Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to just drop the call and restart it again, because we're only getting about a tenth of what you're saying. So look, we'll come back to this one. Well, what do you want to do?
Well, it's okay. Just bring this one up on screen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment too much about the impact north of the border, but here we have an announcement that the programme to bring in these Type 31 frigates has been suspended. It's not completely dead in the water, because what the government is saying, well, we haven't had what we need. We haven't had sufficient offers from firms who want to actually build these ships, so they're going to have to think about it. So it's not the government says we're not going to build them, they're saying, well, we haven't had sufficient response. But then at the same time, we can say, well, that's would appear to be because the commercial sector hasn't been given the time to respond to a contract of this type. And I think it's 5 ships for £1.6 billion or something. Huge money. All looks like incompetence by the Ministry of Defence. And then we get into this, and I'm going to thank the gentleman for sending it through. This is the First Sea Lord, Philip Jones, speaking in a video for deferoreport.com. He's talking about the new aircraft carrier, and he effectively says that when the Queen Elizabeth crosses the Atlantic this autumn for the first time and starts to embark F-35 jets, that will help to dispel some of the myths that have been around for a while. Why do you have a carrier without jets? Well, we've got to make sure the ship is right first. She's a prototype ship. He says a couple of other things, and then he says, if she was an iPhone. And at this point, Mike, I don't think we can take this man seriously. Let's just, label it with something. We've never had ships or aircraft at sea, apparently. This is so unique, it's being compared to an iPhone. This man, very nervous in front of the camera. I think it's because he knows that what he is saying is utter nonsense, and we have a major problem in Britain's military at the moment. He goes on with this, which I've sort of paraphrased, but thankfully we've learned how to build a ship. We've learned about propulsion systems. We're learning about manning her. Of course, we've only been able to do this with collaboration with Thales and co, all of the people in this joint carrier collaboration. And we're grateful to the United States Navy because the USS George H.W. Bush has provided lessons for my officers to understand what it means to task a large air wing. It helped us to see what we're trying to do.
Did he not know what they were trying to do before they embarked on this?
Well, it's clear from what he says, Mike, that he doesn't, because he's standing there in front of the cameras as if the Royal Navy's never actually commissioned an aircraft carrier before and knows how the processes work. I've put a sleep to reality, but it was almost like this man was, I don't know, in a dream world. He is describing utter chaos, that we now cannot get an aircraft carrier to sea properly, fully manned, so that there's sufficient people on board the ship to operate it, and we can't get those aircraft on board. And we also learned that he's talking about this becoming a fully operational carrier in 2021. You would think that is with the UK's F-35 detachment on board, but it then turns out that even then we're going to have a joint operation with the US Marine Corps. So this is not a British aircraft carrier. This is an international aircraft carrier. It only works with the support of the Americans and the French in the background. We do not have a military. Have we got David back up?
We do have David back up.
David,
That was
please.
a fascinating analysis of his comments there for Sea Lord.
Well, I could do a lot more, because the more he said, the more it was obvious that the Royal Navy has been hollowed out. The expertise is gone, the know-how's gone, and we are left floundering around begging to these other nations to actually tell us how to get one of these ships to sea. I mean, if he thinks anything about the new carrier is similar to an iPhone, I think this man's got some serious problems. But do you want to add a bit about those the frigate contract?
Yes, and just before this iPhone analogy, this is very, very strange, because
No,
I'm sorry, David. We have lost you completely. I'm not sure what the problem is. Okay, let's. We're going to have to move on through this a little bit and come on to this one, Brian.
Okay, that's fine. Just catch up with you here. Right, now, another big thank you to somebody who sent this through to us. Now, what it purports to be, and I'm going to say from the quality of this document, I think it is correct. Somebody has written some meticulous notes in court while the Tommy Robinson hearing was taking place on Wednesday, the 18th of July. So I'm taking the notes at face value. I've read them. Do they seem realistic? Are they measured? Are they reasonable? Yes, they are. I felt there were some very interesting points being raised, but the key one that I was interested was this, that the topic of video link came up in this report, and that's what I'd like to just focus on. So I'll read through this very quickly. It says, Court 4 is wood panelled with rows of bound law books on all sides, the room's high, windows at the top, microphones hang down on wires from various points. There are 3 4-foot TV screens on the left and right walls, and the wall opposite the judge's bench. In the front right corner is the dock with heavy black bars, and to the front left the press gallery. There's a large clock on the right hand wall. They then talk about things kicking off at 9:55. Louis Mabley QC, wearing wig and gown, entered and took a position on the right. At 10 a.m, Tommy's legal team enter. Jeremy Dean QC and a female juror, both wearing wigs and gowns, and 2 other legal members wearing suits. They sit to the left. At 10:15 a.m, 3 video screens come on, revealing Tommy Robinson. He looked well, slimmer. His hair was thicker. He was wearing a long-sleeve black shirt and jeans and a belt with a decorative buckle. He sat at a table with an empty chair beside him and a black curtain behind. Occasionally, Tommy drank from a white mug and talked to someone off camera. A male court official with a foreign accent asked Tommy, "Can you hear me?" Tommy said yes. The official asked, "Can you confirm that your name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon?" Yes. "Can you see your barrister?" Yeah. The official said he would ask Tommy to identify himself again at the beginning of proceedings. Peering into his monitor, Tommy asked, "Is it meant to be so small? Can you make the picture bigger?" Tommy held his hands about 6 inches apart to indicate the screen size. The official said he could not change the screen size and asked whether Tommy could adjust it at his end. Tommy said he had a big, massive TV, but 3 very small pictures. The official said, "We cannot change that." And Tommy replied, "Doesn't matter, I can hear." But of course it does matter. It does absolutely matter, because Tommy Robinson should have been brought into court, and Tommy Robinson and the public present should have been able to see and hear justice being done. So the video link now clearly blocking that process. And it doesn't matter whether it was Tommy Robinson in court or any other person in court. Supposedly in our democracy, which we've just been hearing about, people should be able to come into court and see and hear justice being done. So what we've really got here is a perversion of justice by video link, as seeing and hearing is diminished or switched off. And at that point, I want to bring Melanie Shaw on screen, because with Melanie, it was exactly the same process that was taking place. So although she suffered abuse herself and she suffered in prison, when she came into court proceedings, a video link was used. She wasn't even brought into court, and that link was miraculously failing at key points in her defence. Now, I just wanted to highlight this letter, which David, you found and kindly put on your Twitter page, and it's a letter from our very own David Cameron about Melanie Shaw to, I think it's a Mr. Crosby. I might have got that name wrong. It's difficult to read in hand text, but this is the bulk of the letter. Dear Mr. Crosby, thank you for your letter about the suffering of Melanie Shaw, who's currently a remand prisoner at Peterborough Prison. I was sorry to hear what she had to say about the infection with which she's currently struggling. I have at once written to Andrew Sillis MP, Minister for Prisons, Probation and Rehabilitation at the Ministry of Justice, asking him to look into the case. As soon as I receive his reply, I will be back in touch with you. Thank you again for taking the time to bring this matter to my attention. Yours sincerely, David Cameron. And I'll just bring up this main bit, that not only was Melanie Shaw abused in prison, not only is she an abuse victim, but then when she's been in court, she hasn't been able to defend herself because of a video link. David, have we any knowledge whether David Cameron actually did come back with another reply?
That's the only one I've seen. If there's been more, I'm afraid I don't have a record of it. I mean, he's obviously pointing out that he's going to gather some information, ask someone to look in. So there should be another reply. So if anyone's got a copy, if they could perhaps let us know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to internet safety, because the government has announced that they're establishing a new council for internet safety, expanding the scope of the UK Council for Child Internet Safety, and guided by the government's internet safety strategy. The UK Council for Internet Safety will work to improve online safety for everyone in the UK, not just children, particularly the needs of groups who are often disproportionately targets of online abuse. They say they've opened the application process to appoint members to the UK CIS Executive Board, offering experienced and committed organisations or individuals the chance to help make the UK the safest place in the world to be online. UK CIS will bring together a partnership of more than 200 organisations representing government, regulators, industry, law enforcement, academia and charities. Priority areas of focus will include online harms such as cyberbullying and sexual exploitation, radicalisation and extremism, violence against women and girls, hate crime and hate speech, forms of discrimination against groups protected under the Equality Act, for example, on the basis of disability or race. And who's leading this? Well, Margot James, Digital Minister, and she said only through collaborative action will the UK be the safest place to be online. By bringing together key stakeholders from tech giants to the third sector, UK CIS will be at the cornerstone of this effort, driving the development of technical solutions and equipping UK citizens to tackle online harms. So, David, we have been talking about this, and I do wonder, I think that we need to talk about this a lot more, about the fact that in every policy area, something is being used as an excuse to merge the third sector with the private sector, with the public sector, and create this, I don't know what we describe it as, certainly a communitarian, perhaps is the right word, infrastructure. This is not democracy.
It is not. It's a system whereby the policies that control our lives are made in entirely obscure ways. They're made behind closed doors, they're made in the civil service, they're made in think tanks, and they are run out through a whole series of compliant organizations, compliant, centrally funded, and hence controlled. And there will be no objection raised. And the huge number of them gives an impression that this is a society as a whole speaking. It's meant to convey that impression, but it means nothing of the sort. It's actually one voice simply being replicated over and over and over again. We see it everywhere. We see it in medicine. We see it in education. We see it in the law. We see it everywhere. It's very insidious, and it's the sort of thing that parliaments were meant to be doing in the open, where public debate was meant to happen in ways that could be seen and understood and engaged with. That doesn't go on anymore.
Absolutely.
Well, I think my additional comment to that is we come back to that game with the MPs. The insidious part of that game was that children are being encouraged to think that all of those organisations, the compliant organisations that you're mentioning, that they are actually independent organisations standing up for worthwhile causes, be they charities or non-government organisations. But of course, you're right. These are all organisations which are out there. They pretend to be independent, as UK Column often shows the hypocrisy over that. They are government controlled and they're putting out exactly the same line. But what do we want to do? We want to get children at an early stage and try and convince them that this developing participatory democracy is real. So it's immensely dangerous, this stuff. And probably that gives us a nice little lead into the BBC. This one caught my eye this morning. It's the BBC sort of quick read of the news. If you're too busy, trust us, the BBC, just flick through these headlines and you will know all that you need to know. So when I looked at their news daily, they'd got an important one that North Korea was apparently returning the remains of US servicemen who died in North Korea. When I came down the pack a little bit, I then found it got a special section where it said, if you read one thing today, read this, and that was the drug causing chaos in prisons. So that was very important. We then had this one, if you listen to one thing today, happy accident, the eruption that revealed the jet streams. I presume they needed that in order to justify their linking to the heat wave to the jet stream, Mike. But the one that I really focused in was this. If you see one thing today, you've got to look at this BBC article, and the sub-headline was "People Think We're Devil Worshippers." And then there was a little caption in the corner, "Slave to Sirens." Now, what was this about? Well, it's the BBC getting very, very excited that Lebanon has now got the first all-female heavy metal band, and that is bringing girl power to Lebanon. So according to the BBC, the fact that we've now got this heavy rock band, encourage you to look at the video and listen to the young lady sing it. Well, I think she's singing. She might be in pain. But this is all about bringing a whole raft of new standards to Lebanon. And the message in this little video clip is that if you're young, you don't want to be conforming at all. Society's always pressuring people into acting a certain way. You've got to do whatever it is that you want to do. And I just chose one of their highlighted songs. So this song is all about the essence of evil. So the BBC doing remarkably well here. But really, this was, I've called it a masterful piece of subversive propaganda, because the BBC is blatantly pushing that traditional culture in Lebanon is wrong and constrains the individual, and it's got to be replaced with whatever you want to do is fine, and adoption of the BBC's own values. I'll get you in here in just a second, David. I'll just show two more slides here. This is one of the ladies who's got her name down as a producer. I actually tweeted a reply onto her Twitter page saying, did she actually realise what she was doing? And I pointed out the work of BBC Media Action in destabilising Syria. Is she ignorant, puffed up, possibly? Does she know what she's doing as a change agent? Well, we can't be sure, but it's all becoming a bit obvious, I think. And then this was another effort by the BBC. So a major article that a Pride March in Beirut had been cancelled after the organiser was detained and held by the police for a while. So what's going on here? Well, this is the BBC appearing to support gay rights, but of course where the BBC is going ultimately is transhumanism, which means that it doesn't matter whether you're heterosexual or gay, you're going to be replaced by something rather new and different. David, this is government propaganda. This is British government soft power being injected into these overseas societies in order to destabilise them.
And it's the same power that we were discussing just a moment ago, when we've got all the functions of the state plus the vast majority of the third sector, plus the civil service and the think tanks behind the scene pushing in the one direction, and they're saying, well, we're going to protect your children, we must work together to protect children. But there's an agenda that's been pushed out there. That means you must adopt a certain means of thinking. Certain things are not sayable. Render all critical faculties, all critical thinking to the received wisdom as broadcast by the BBC, and is coming from this strange secular theocracy we seem to be seeing installed before us. And any sort of opposition, be it from traditional views in Lebanon or traditional views in Glasgow, is not going to be tolerated.
No. And just to emphasise the point, where has this little BBC media clip come from? Well, it's come from this organisation. It's BBC Pop-Up. This was a new 6-month pilot of the company's first mobile bureau. BBC has become a company here, Mike. It was interesting. This travelling news office will relocate to a new town each month for 6 months, enabling its global journalists to settle in, live and work within the communities they're covering. And there was, back in the 4th of May, we were in Lebanon, they were in Lebanon, and what's the topic? Pimps, prostitutes and refugees. So wherever there's the opportunity to get into dark, unpleasant stuff in other countries, the BBC can do it. Of course, the BBC will not investigate child abuse in Britain in this way. So double standards, but targeting that Lebanon culture, I think, in order to overturn it. David, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you also to our viewers and listeners today. We will be back at the same time on Monday. Bye-bye.